Well, good morning and welcome once again to Elevenses. It's show number 178. It's Sunday, the 10th of October, and it's a pretty gloomy, if rather mild day here in Kent. Kent? London? What am I talking about? Kent. Right, so, okay, who's here today so far? We've got... everything's going a little bit slow. Clive, Sue, and Tony have all looked in and said hello. Good morning to all. Good morning to everybody else who will be looking in at some point during the rest of the show. Be good to see you here. So what have we got for you today? Well, a reasonably packed show again. The fuel crisis, is it over? Well, it's yes and no is the answer to that. We've got a fairly horrific story about a pro-cyclist who was attacked by a machete-wielding motorcycle gang in Richmond Park. The examiners' strike appears to have gone on hold as the DVSA have dropped, at least temporarily, the extra test plan that they were committed to. Kawasaki have announced that they will have an all-electric motorcycle range by 2035, the first of the big Japanese manufacturers to commit to going that far. Damon, a Canadian company, have actually got $40 million worth of orders, but haven't actually yet delivered a bike. And Buell are back from the dead again with their Hammerhead 1190. And the Tiger 660 Sport, a bike that was announced rumoured just a few weeks ago, has actually appeared on the Triumph website for 8450. And finally, we'll finish off with today's better biking tip, which is all about riding in fog. So don't forget, if you have any questions, any comments, anything you'd like to say about the show generally, feedback, anything you'd like me to cover in a future show. I keep asking for suggestions and I still haven't got any answers. So if there's anything you would like me to talk about, do drop me a line and I'll do my best to cover it. So settle down for the next 30 minutes and we'll take you through the rest of the show. All right. Okay. So the big question, is the fuel crisis over? Well, depending on who you ask, the answer could be yes, it could be no. The actual answer seems to be not quite. The latest data as of Friday shows that fuel stocks across the country have started to recover from their lows of 10 days or so ago. And government figures show that the national average end of day fuel stock is sitting at around 25%, and that's up from a low of 15% on September the 25th. But you have to put that in context with where the tanks normally sit. Normally, the level of fuel you'll find typically in a fuel station is between about 40 and 45% full. And the other problem is that the figures show considerable regional variation. Stock levels in London and the southeast remain far lower than the national average. So I'd be quite interested to hear what it's like in your particular part of the world. Southeast England, as of Friday, had an average of just 16%, lowest in the country, of fuel stocks, and London wasn't much better than that. It was average capacity of just 18% at the end of the day. And my own observations, being out and about over the last day or two, suggest that there are still many filling stations here that are completely dry in northwest London. Rather bizarrely, given the remoteness of the regions, Scotland and Wales both have above average stocks, although I would point out it's not back to where they normally sit. Meanwhile, the ping pong blame game continues. Now, the crisis started on the Thursday, the 23rd of September, which is getting on for 3 weeks ago now, when BP announced it might have to ration fuel as the company temporarily closed some petrol forecourts after they said that transport of fuel from refineries was being hit by an industry-wide shortage of truck drivers. Now, not surprisingly, that did lead many drivers to head out and fill their tanks, and that did lead to shortages across all sites. Now, the government disputed the fuel delivery issue and said it was just panic buying. But press stories have emerged over the last week that suggest that national fuel stocks on forecourts had been running down for several weeks before the BP announcement. And the implication of that is that the imminent shortage of fuel was likely to have been known to the government for some considerable time. Now, Brian Madison, who's the chairman of the Petrol Retailers Association, said that the data showed the fuel crisis had been an unintended consequence of the government's switch to E10 fuel, as forecourt stocks fell sharply after September the 1st, which was when the government introduced the new E10 fuel as the standard unleaded petrol. Now, that particular statement was promptly refuted by a Department for Transport spokesperson who said there's no evidence to suggest that the introduction of E10 was related to the fuel shortage. The fuel issues we've seen in recent weeks were caused by an unprecedented spike in demand caused by atypical consumer behaviour. So nothing about the shortages of deliveries that BP were talking about, and basically passing the buck to you and me, who might have actually wanted to have some petrol to do what we need to do. The DFT spokesman continued, the legislation that the government put in place to introduce E10 stocks allows fuel retailers to still use existing stocks until 1st of November as part of a gradual change. So there's no need for the emptying of storage tanks. The timeframe was extensively discussed and agreed with stakeholders. I guess if you run a big filling station with big sort of footfall or tyre fall, I suppose, through the forecourt, yes, you could probably empty your tank by the 1st of November without too much problem. But I do wonder about the more remote rural filling stations, which probably don't sell anything like as much petrol. Anyway, I don't know the answer to that. I doubt that we'll ever find out. But whatever the truth is, the fact is, after more than 2 weeks of shortages and a week after 100 army drivers were deployed to drive tankers, the excuse that emptying filling stations is still the result of panic buying is starting to wear a bit thin, in my opinion. All right, okay. Don't forget, you can set up a reminder to catch Elevenses every Wednesday and Sunday at 11. We're usually going out live. Wednesday's show will be a recorded show, I think, because I may be on the way back from Gloucester. I can't promise whether it will be live or recorded at the moment. It depends on activity, how I get back, what time I arrive and all that kind of thing. I'm basically giving a presentation to a riding group out there. So do make a note in your diary, and you can catch my news, sometimes controversial views, and better biking tips as we go along through the course of the show. Okay. Any other comments? We do have another comment come in. What's this to say? Tony says, Beaconsfield is nightmare, either closed or massive queues. Yeah, I'm not entirely surprised, Tony. Thanks for sharing that with us. Anybody else have local news? Always pleased to hear that. Okay, so in today's next news story today, Alexander Richardson, a professional cyclist, he actually competed in last month's Tour of Britain for the UCI Pro Team Alpecin Phoenix. He was attacked in Richmond Park on Thursday by a machete-wielding gang of men on motorcycles. He was injured in the attack, and his made-to-measure bicycle worth £6,000 was stolen. Now, he was training in the park at around 3 p.m, so broad daylight in the middle of the day, basically, when he said he spotted 4 men wearing balaclavas on a pair of motorcycles following him. And he said, I knew exactly what they wanted to take my bike and started to think what was the best thing I could do. He tried to reach the safety of a local cafe, but could not escape the motorcycles, one of which he thinks deliberately crashed into him at high speed. He said he tried to ride the 500 meters at full speed, but they simply crashed into him. And he was doing about 60 kph at the time as well, so that's about 37 miles an hour. He said, I came off the bike and the first motorcycle lost control. I held on to the bike, but the second motorcycle then dragged me and the bike along the floor for another 100 meters. After this, they pulled out a 15-inch machete at which point I thought better and let the bike go. So the pro cyclist has urged fellow cyclists to be careful in the area, and Richardson shared on Instagram a picture of his bloody leg. He says, "I'm pretty cut up and bruised with a swollen hip, but tomorrow is another day." It's a pretty appalling story, really. Broad daylight attack on a cyclist. It just goes to show the state of affairs in the country at the moment. So what else have we got for you today? The driving strike by examiners, is it going ahead? It was scheduled for Monday and Tuesday, and you'll recall that the DVSA were left with a backlog of tests, which were either cancelled or delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and some estimates have put the number of cancelled tests around 500,000. Now, the situation has been particularly complicated by loss of European HGV drivers. They've either left the UK due to Brexit or after the COVID pandemic, and the result is the shortage of truck drivers, which we just talked about in connection with the fuel problem, and delivery difficulties right across supply chains. Now, in an attempt to increase the number of qualified truck drivers, the DVSA have recruited a limited number of extra examiners, and they have handed over the responsibility for signing off some of the off-road manoeuvres to truck trainers, rather than making them part of the test itself, which was actually always in the EU regulations, which were put forward some years ago. So it's always been part of the possible way that the training could go ahead. Now, at the same time, the DVSA wanted to increase the daily number of car tests each examiner takes from 7 to 8. And they would do that not by lengthening the day, but by actually shortening the gap between the tests. So effectively, an examiner would sign off the test result for one candidate and basically walk more or less straight into the waiting room to pick up the next candidate. So there'd be no breaks for the examiners between tests. I mean, literally, it would be just a few minutes. Now, the examiners, who are part of the Public and Commercial Services Union, those members of that union argued that the whole proposal had been done with virtually no consultation. It had been imposed on the driving examiners, and they argued that the extra test would lead to fatigue, additional pressure on the examiners, and that could put the drivers on test at risk, because the examiner would not have that chance to spend just a few minutes between each test relaxing for a few seconds. So the examiners were due to strike on Monday and Tuesday this week coming. However, a report from the Driving Instructors Association I received yesterday suggests that DVSA have backed down, at least temporarily, and so the strike action will also be suspended. So this DIA announcement says that DVSA have stated, "We're not moving to the new programs on Monday, the 11th of October, and there will be no examiner strike on 11th and 12th of October. We'll ensure we inform you in time to make adjustments for your members and their customers." Well, having looked online, I can find nothing else about what's going on. So I just have to assume that the DIA's information is correct. My advice, if you do have a test book for the next couple of days, is turn up as normal. At least consult your driving instructor first, but I would suspect that things will be going ahead as normal. Okay, so don't forget, if you do enjoy the show, you can head over to my Ko-fi page, coffee.com/survival skills, and you can consider supporting me over there for these shows. And if you do so, you open up access to hundreds of better biking articles, which I'm adding to all the time. So do pop over there, do see what is on offer. There are plenty of free articles to read, so you can choose whether or not you can spare the price of a cuppa. So what else have we got here? We have another comment. Chrissy Hull says the south of England is low, rural areas it's dire. We don't have the underground or regular bus services. Absolutely. Cycle lanes and village shops no longer exist, so we can't walk to buy supplies. Yes, absolutely. I know that from my own village in Kent, which lost its village shop. We're being overlooked when news of the fuel crisis. Yes. Small petrol stations and garages are not getting supplies, and power station in Southampton is the biggest in the UK. So, okay, there again, we have some on-the-ground information about the fuel crisis. Thanks for that, Chrissy. Much appreciated. Right, now, you probably know that motorcycles are going to be tailpipe emission free by 2035, which generally implies that they'll probably be going electric. And Kawasaki has now announced that all motorcycles to be sold in developed countries, they list Japan, Europe, the United States, Canada, and Australia, I'm sure there will be a few others to add to that list, will become fully electric by 2035 as part of their move towards carbon neutrality. And reports say that it's likely that they will have a range of 10 battery-powered motorcycles launched by 2025, and the entire range will go electric by that 2035 cutoff date. Now, Kawasaki, how much do they do in terms of world business? Well, they sold 380,000 motorcycles last year, which is a global market share of roughly 1%. Kawasaki Chief Executive Yasuhiko Hashimoto says that his company is open to establishing a partnership with others in order to achieve their objectives. Now, Yamaha are also aiming for a goal of making 90% of their models electric, but they have proposed the later date of 2050. Quite frankly, as I said before, after the rapid development of electric motorcycles by Chinese manufacturers, and also now in India, which is making a big push to go electric, with the biggest factory to build electric motorcycles in the world now under construction in India, it's a sign that the big Japanese manufacturers are finally recognizing that they do have to move away from the internal combustion engine, at least in its current form. Now, there isn't all good news about this, because of course it will mean that there'll be increased competition for the raw materials that go to make these batteries. Car manufacturers are also obviously going to have to switch, and there are right now limited supplies of the materials, so it'll be interesting to see how battery technology develops. Kawasaki say they are also exploring hydrogen propulsion, but the report suggests that this is a more of a near-term solution than a long-term one. So make of that what you will. Now, talking of electric motorcycles, Damon Motors have announced plans to develop a manufacturing and R&D plant in British Columbia. The Canadian startup also announced that pre-orders for its Hypersport motorcycle had topped $40 million. Now, the 111,000 square foot facility is said to create more than 300 manufacturing jobs and more than 500 office jobs. And they say it will be capable of producing 40,000 electric bikes a year. Now, CEO Jay Giraud said revenue is expected to hit nearly 1 billion annually by 2025. And they also propose another manufacturing plant in Latin America, which should be up and running by then. And they claim that that will mean they'll be able to produce 100,000 electric motorcycles annually. Now, if you remember the output from Kawasaki, 380,000, you can see that Damon are aiming quite high. The problem is, though, despite taking almost $4 million in orders in September, which is a new record, they posted 3.58 million in July and 3.68 million in August. No electric motorcycles have yet been delivered to their customers. The motorcycle there that's the Hypersport. The company makes some fairly remarkable claims for it, such as 200 horsepower and 200 newton meters of torque, together with a claimed 200 mile per hour top speed. Now, that goes together with a stated 200 plus miles of combined highway and city usage on a full charge. Now, why? But there's no reason that can't be achieved with a big enough battery. But the battery pack on board is said to be 20 kilowatt hours. And frankly, it's hard to see how a bike with that kind of performance could actually get that kind of mileage from that battery. The fully fed Zero SRS gets between 100 and 120 miles from its 14.4 kilowatt hour pack in mixed riding. But if you open the bike up to motorway speeds, then real world tests suggest it will be running on the electrical equivalent of fumes in around 70 miles. So yes, okay, theoretically, if you crawl around, I suspect that battery on the Damon could just about manage it. But if you use anything like the performance, you'll be running well short of that. Now, in 2020, Damon announced that they'd acquired the intellectual property of Mission Motors. Now, that was a failed electric motorcycle startup, and they have said that they plan to incorporate some of Mission's motor and battery tech into the Hypersport. That's interesting because the claims for the performance were made before they actually got hold of Mission's motor and battery tech. And anyway, take the bike's other features. It's said to be capable of shape shifting. That is to say, it can alter the riding geometry on the fly. Now, that was a technology that we saw decades ago in the Yamaha Morpho. That was a prototype which could change the bars, foot pegs, and screen position, all at the press of a button to accommodate different types of riding. And the Hypersport is said to be able to do exactly the same. The claims are that the Hypersport will also be fitted with an array of sensors, including radar, multiple cameras, non-visual sensors. I'm wondering what radar is if it's not a non-visual sensor, but hey-ho. And the AI, which will be capable of tracking up to 64 moving vehicles around the bike at any time. Now, so basically, given all that, it's even harder to see how the price can be kept as low as just $16,995 for the base model. That's around £12,500 at current rates. And you can pre-order that model for just $100. Now, the top of the range bike, the Premier, is currently priced at $39,995, which is a fairly whopping £29,400. But you can still pre-order it from just $1,000. So put all that together, and as the Electric Web Tech site said in April last year, Damon seems to be doing a lot of selling of expensive motorcycles that don't exist yet. Similarly, back from the dead more times than I can remember, the latest incarnation of Buell Motorcycle Company have announced plans to launch the Hammerhead 1190. If I can get the picture of that up on screen for you, there it is, coming to you any moment. That's the bike in question. The company say that they will be taking reservations for this machine as of the 1st of November. The brand is currently based in Cascade near Grand Rapids in Michigan. And Buell has certainly been an iconic American brand since the founder, Eric Buell, launched his namesake company more than 3 decades ago. If you remember that he started by building modified versions of Harley-Davidson motors, but put into his own very unique frames. That company came to a kind of a finish when Buell sold out to Harley-Davidson. And then Harley-Davidson themselves moved out of the sports bike market completely. Buell bought the rights back and relaunched Eric Buell Racing, LLC, which presumably means Limited Liability Company. Buell name was then acquired by Liquid Asset Partners, LLC. They got hold of that, the assets in 2016, and they acquired the right to use the name in 2020. So they have plans to launch 10 new motorcycles, and Bill Melvin, who's CEO of Buell Motorcycle Company, said in a statement, "When we said Buell is back, we meant it. We have former executives from Buell, General Motors, Lotus Engineering, Toyota, and Bombardier recreational products, ensuring we're manufacturing and developing the highest quality products. We're now putting finishing touches on our factory and will be kicking off production of the best American superbike on the 1st of November. All right, so basically, good luck to them there. So a couple of comments have come in. Buell won't be in Europe as it has no ABS, says Clive. Nigel says theoretical battery capacities increase with every press release, although actual battery data is a bit on the light side. Yes, I mean, there are a lot of new technologies coming out which are promising good things, including quicker charging times, but it's all still very much in the research and development phase. Some of it is actually research paper and hasn't actually been prototypes as far as I know. Clive says Eric Buell has nothing to do with his new company. Absolutely, Eric. As I said, the name has been acquired, so yes, Eric is no longer attached to the company. And Clive says he has an 1190 SX and it's awesome. Old tech nowadays, mind. Yes. Okay. So, all right. So what else is new? Well, the Tiger Sport 660. You remember the Trident was launched very recently, and it didn't take long before a sort of well, I'm not going to. Yes, they build it as an adventure bike, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Appeared based on the 660 triple motor, and it was. I talked about it on show 167, which was on the 29th of August, and that was the first inkling that it was coming. But the ready-to-launch model has appeared just literally under 2 months later on the Triumph UK website. So let's take a look at it. Here it is. So what do you get? Well, along with all the usual marketing puff about class-leading handling, specification, power, style, as well as the usual low-down torque combined with strong mid-range performance, incredible top-end power, which they say is a characteristic only of a triple motor. There is a bit of a plus. It's a relatively competitive price in what is a rapidly growing middleweight adventure bike section of the market. Now, before you start adding on the obligatory bolt-on goodies, there are more than 40 Triumph accessories listed. Everything, of course, from engine bars to hand protectors. The bike's currently listed at £8,450. Now, that does mean that there are other cheaper bikes out there, notably the A2-friendly CF Moto 650 MT, which is a fraction of the price, but the ace in the hole really is that the triple engine delivers a 81 PS peak power and 64 Newton meters of torque, and that should give it basically a pretty significant performance boost over the twin cylinder competition such as the Tracer 700. A second card that Triumph may have up its sleeve is low cost of maintenance. Service intervals are set at every 10,000 miles, which is nice, and it will come with a 2-year unlimited mileage warranty. And a further plus is integrated pannier mounts. Now, one of the things I'm always kind of a bit frustrated by motorcycles is that you buy a lovely sculpted bike and then you have to bolt on a sort of half the fourth bridge to fit panniers on the back of it. My brother's just bought for his NC 750 out in the States, he's just bought a pannier system from Shad, and frankly by the time you actually bolt the panniers onto the thing, the panniers are almost as wide as his Fiat 500 electric car. So he's not convinced that he's actually going to keep it, and he may send the whole lot back. So the integrated mounts should pull everything in a lot tighter. Now, on the other hand, you are therefore, of course, restricted to the dedicated panniers that Triumph provide for you. So you can't pick your own, as it were. Everything can be color coded as well to match the bike, which Triumph seem to be very proud of. What else do you get? Well, you get a ride-by-wire throttle, get a 6-speed gearbox with optimized ratios, we're told, for fun and all-round everyday rideability. So hopefully that means the motor is actually geared a little bit lower than most of these bikes are, so it will actually accelerate at real world speeds rather than deliver a sort of an entirely theoretical and pretty useless top end speed. You do get only 2 riding modes, road and rain, which should be enough, quite frankly, for most people. You get ABS and you get switchable traction control. You get upside down shower forks at the front, but they come unadjustable. The rear shower monoshock is apparently a straight push by the look of it, no rising rate. So you just get dual rate spring and remote preload, but again, no adjustable damping that I can see. Wheels are a road 17-inch size. Something that might put riders off is the seat height. They say it's an accessible seat height, but it's actually 835 millimeters on the standard settings, which is actually almost 33 inches. And that's 50 millimeters or 2 inches higher than my XJ6, which isn't the lowest bike in the world. So it will be a little bit on the higher side. The tank holds 17 litres. The screen's height adjustable, says it's a one-handed operation, so you can easily alter the level of wind protection while riding. Personally, I think stopping would be a better idea, but hey-ho. All lights are LED. And as a bonus, the bike is actually fitted with, hurrah, self-cancelling indicators, something I have missed ever since my lovely old FZ 750, dating from 1990, expired. So 30-plus-year-old tech making a comeback. Along with that, you get the usual multifunction instruments with a TFT display. You get an optional My Triumph connectivity system, which gives you access to turn-by-turn navigation, GoPro control if you need that sort of thing, and phone and music interaction. But the fact the bike is built down to a bit of a price is obvious when the press release finds it necessary to tell us that the front twin Nissan brake calipers have a span adjustable lever attached to them. That's hardly a luxury or item, is it? So again, just take a look at the bike there. Although it's being billed as an adventure bike, I would say that the general looks relate more to something like the Faired Hornet that I have, or the XJ6. Actually, it does look a bit like the XJ6 from side on. Same sort of humpy tank, the same sort of shape of the fairing, quite frankly, and also the same semi-underslung stainless steel silencer with the sort of exhaust popping out just behind the rider's peg on the right hand side. That all shouts to me road bike, but it does look like it should be an affordable go anywhere, do anything bike that pretty much should be at home doing anything, from commuting to up touring. So frankly, I think that's the bike that Triumph should have built more than a decade ago. But there we are, they got there in the end, and hopefully it'll prove to be a nice bike. Right, comment from Tony. Tony says that he thinks EVs are a dead end. Technology is moving forward, but charging will always be a major issue. Well, yes, I know there are arguments against EVs, but the grid system is a significant issue. But the investment will come. If petrol can't be sold at the pumps, the petrol companies will have to switch to selling something else. I don't think we're going to stop this. I'm not even sure I want to stop it. I quite like electric motorcycles, as I'm sure most of you know. Right, okay. So where are we? Nigel says just install a big diesel generator. Yes, well, you could do that, I suppose. Right, so okay, on to today's final item. It's the better biking item for today. Don't forget, you can always read my books as well if you need some other riding tips. You'll find those over on my spotlight page at lulu.com. Do pop over there and have a look at the books. I'm afraid the 15% special offer expired on Friday. I need to remove that, but do look out. I do offer regular discounts on those books when my publisher offers me a discount. So anyway, today's better biking tip, riding in fog. Now, we're finally into that time of year when, if the conditions are right, more warm, moist air is drawn up from far to the south of the UK. But the longer nights and settled conditions can lead to clear skies and plummeting temperatures, and that is when we get fog. And that's exactly what's happening at the moment. The remnants of Hurricane Sam passed far to the north of the UK, so we barely noticed it, except for the fact that the storm was powerful enough to draw a lot of warm air up. And that's what we've been experiencing for the last couple of days of warm weather. But it has brought a lot of moisture with it, and that's meant cloud and also fog. Now, I have to say, from long experience as a courier and also having to get to work when I was an instructor, working down on Romney Marsh, that riding in fog, particularly at night, is probably my least favourite bit of biking. So if I can, I would always stay put, and if I can't, then I'll do my best to prepare for the problem before I leave home. Now, hopefully, it won't take me to tell you too much about the problems that other road users will have seeing us. Drivers can't see a lot better than we can, even though they have windscreen wipers. And they have better lights, usually, than most motorcycles. Lights on the bikes and high-vis clothing may help, but light colours, bear this in mind, particularly white, if you've got a white fairing on your bike or a white helmet, they will blend into fog in daytime. So in daytime at least, darker colours may actually be somewhat better. So perhaps a pink or an orange high-vis would be a better choice than the usual satin yellow, which is not actually all that much for contrast with the fog. And secondly, remember too, don't use those vests and tabards that so many riders use. Get something with sleeves, because they offer far superior all-round visibility. You can be seen around fairings, around top boxes or passengers, and you have a side-on visibility too with sleeves. Now, one particular problem with a motorcycle is that very, very few come with rear fog lights. I think the only one was in fact a Norton. If you live in an area constantly subject to fog, such as the North Kent coast or Romney Marsh, where I used to work, you get a lot of foggy days, so consider fitting a fog light. Now, all I did was this. I simply bolted one to an indicator mount and then simply wired it into the tail light circuit. So no wiring to run up to the dashboard or anything like that. I simply had a switch under the seat. So, okay, I had to stop and pop the seat off to turn it on, but that really was a 2-second job. And it was much easier to mount that than trying to remove all the bodywork to get under the tank and run the wires up to the dash and then find somewhere to mount a switch up on the dashboard. So it saved a lot of work. And even cheaper and easier, if dubiously legal, is to fit a high intensity red LED as used by cyclists. Just remember, don't set it flashing, because that is definitely illegal. Now, watch out for vehicles ahead with no fog lights, and watch out for cars where fog lights drown out brake lights. It's a classic riding error to catch one of those up and then sit right on the tail, and then things can start to go wrong. Now, years ago, I was with my mum and dad. We were on holiday with my family, and dad was driving. It was thick fog, and I can remember my dad turning into a petrol station because he actually wanted to clean the windscreen. There was a lot of salt all over it, and as he pulled up, the whole string of cars behind him all followed us into the petrol station, looked confused, and drove off again. But what if he'd braked hard, or what if he'd even driven off the road? We don't want to be caught out by that kind of tail end Charlie nonsense, so stay back. Watch out for oncoming vehicles. If they've turned their lights on, they'll be easy to spot, but not everybody does, of course, and cyclists and pedestrians will likely be tricky to see. So my advice there is not to get too close to the left. There may also be stationary vehicles, many of which of course will be unlit, and I have seen people have collisions with things like skips. I was out actually one day dispatch riding in central London, and I heard somebody had ridden into a skip, which I'd only just missed myself, because it was parked unlit in the middle of Fleet Street of all places. and a rider about 2 minutes after me collided with it. I discovered this when I went back the other way and there were police there. So I tend to stay near the centre line to keep away from these hazards. But it also means that you keep away from these traffic calming pinch points, which are pushed out from the curb and often very difficult to see. But having said that, the centre of the road is not entirely hazard free, and we need to look out for centre islands. But you can see those because the centre line splits either side. Now, don't rely on seeing them. Lights may not light them up, and they may not all be lit up either. Many these days have just reflective material on them and rely on our lights lighting them up. And of course, once they're dirty, they don't work very well. And if we're on dip beam in fog, we probably won't see them until the last moment. And there are, of course, many cases where bollards get knocked down, and that just leaves a curb in the middle of the road to trip us up. One of the problems of riding in fog is a sort of sense of dislocation, thanks to our normal clues being hard to see or even invisible. And even familiar roads can seem very weird in thick fog. So use all the clues available, road markings and road signs. I know many riders think they're unimportant, but in fog, we can't see the road long distances ahead, and they become absolutely vital to give us a heads up on what we can't see. Now, the white line is a really important clue. I've already mentioned it can warn us about central reservations, but knowing the difference between a lane marking and a slip road marking can help avoid the error I did in spray one night, heavy spray. I rode off the A1 and found myself sliding on my backside on wet grass. And what happened, I figured out, was that I'd actually gone up a slip road across the white line without spotting it, and ended up on the access to a petrol station and cafe. I was lucky that there was lots of grass to slide on. So know the difference too between the short lane divider and the longer hazard line. Once you see the hazard line, you know there's a problem ahead of some sort, and think about why the center line might go solid as well. At night, cat's eyes will give us a clue. They'll get closer as the hazard line appears, and they'll get even closer if the line's gone solid. And don't forget, they are coloured too. Red to the left, amber to the right, mimicking the tail lights of cars, brake lights, and overtaking indicators. White you'll find between lanes. Green where vehicles can leave or join a carriageway. So it's all very useful stuff to know where we are on the road. It's also worth knowing that illuminated cat's eyes are often installed in places where fog is likely to form. So you could run into a bank of fog even if there is no fog visible at the moment. Solid lines along the edge of the carriageway tell us where vehicles may exit, because that solid line will actually brake, as well as it being a help, of course, to stay on the road. Read warning signs. Watch out for junction signs. Watch out for bends particularly. It's difficult to assess the tightness of corner, but that's why we have those signs in the first place. The more signs, the more awkward the bend is likely to be. Chevrons tell us where it gets tricky. And look out for reflective posts too, because they'll help orient you on the road. You'll find red to the left and white to the right. So if you looking at a right-hand bend. As I say, it's not rocket science. And while you're doing all that, don't forget to keep an eye on the mirrors too, because you may find drivers traveling quicker than you. If they are and you're being tailgated, simply pull over and let the driver past. So keep the visor clean. Riding fog is exhausting, but the good news is all those clues I've just given you, you can all be practiced on a nice sunny day, ready for when the weather goes crappy. All right, okay. Just before I go, I will tell you about the next webcast, which will be live on Wednesday, 3rd of November. That will be going out at 8 p.m. So you can sign up if you want to. I've just lost hang on a minute, let me try and get that in the right place. I'll just give you the link to follow on that one. There we go. If you want to sign up for that, it's now open to bookings, and basically it's called Breaking the Circle, and it will all be about braking in corners, whether it's something to be avoided at all costs or an essential skill that all riders should master. Join me on that first Wednesday in November to find out my views. Right, so that's it from Survival Skills today. Don't forget, you can comment, like, and share these videos with your biking friends and family. And if you've got some fuel out there and you are out on the bike today, do ride safe out there. I'll be back with the next 11s on Wednesday at 11.